All right, welcome back. Back with a quick little preview here. Now wrapping up my mini preview series where I went through every single region and I gave a brief little preview of every single team heading into this tour, talking about some of the things I'm excited to see for certain teams, some of the things I'd like to see them improve upon, and also taking a look at all the roster changes that have taken place since the start of the first tour and give you guys a brief little overview just in case you missed any of it. I, of course, will not be covering Eastern Europe due to the fact that their tour was postponed and we still don't know when that's going to be taking place. So no predictions and no previews for Eastern Europe until then. They also will be getting excluded from my power rankings video, which I'll be doing every single Friday going forward, including this Friday. So tune into that if you don't want to miss it. They will not be included in that. However, as soon as that starts up again, I'll try and slot them back into where I think those teams should be on the board, most of which being kind of around where they were before this postponement. But yeah, regardless, let's get into South America. This is a pretty exciting region. We actually had a pretty decent amount of roster changes without it being too overwhelming like some other regions, while also not being too underwhelming like North America and Western Europe and China, who pretty much didn't go through any changes at all. Starting off with Beastcoast, however, this is a team that has stuck together entirely and has been together for a very, very long time now, and they had a pretty hit or miss tour. Again, I kind of touched on this yesterday in my Tour 2 predictions video, which if you haven't seen, feel free to click that in either of the two corners. Don't know which corner it's going to pop up in, but I'm excited to see how this tour ends up going for them because, of course, last tour they didn't finish in the top two, meaning that if there was a major, Beastcoast would have missed it, which would have been huge. But fortunately for them, we did have the regional finals, and they looked damn good in those regional finals. Hector came back to the roster. He was looking fantastic. Everyone on the team was playing super well. It didn't just look like it was Beastcoast playing pretty bad, and then every now and then Whisper was playing extremely well enough to carry them to a victory pretty much all on his own. Like we saw near the end of the first tour when they were starting to lose series to teams like SG Esports, Thunder Awaken, and Infamous. So I'm excited to see what Beastcoast we're going to be getting for this tour, if we're going to be getting a mix of both like we did in the first half, where they're really, really strong for the first half of the tour and they kind of fall off in the back half, or maybe they start a little weak and they get better with time, or maybe they're just going to be the dominant force that we know that they can be in this tour. Either way, I'm excited to see how they go, and they should be a major team. Again, they should. In the previous tour, they wouldn't have been, but I think with this newfound confidence that they've had with winning those regional finals, I think it's pretty fair to assume that these guys should be attending the first major. Now moving on to Thunder Awaken, ending off with 255 DPC points. And in case I didn't iterate that already, the red numbers next to all the teams is how many DPC points they're currently sitting at. 255, very solid. They earned themselves 300 points from finishing first place in the tour. However, they did suffer some point deductions due to the roster changes that they did make after the regional finals. That was, of course, removing Oscar and bringing in Sacred to play position 3. Other than that, the roster is pretty much the exact same as it was in the last tour, and that's why I'm still kind of expecting some pretty big things from this team. Not only did they kick Oscar, but they're also bringing in Sacred, who had a pretty fantastic tour in the winter tour that we just had. And so for Thunder Awaken, much like Beastcoast, I think not making it to the major would be a pretty huge disappointment for them. My only concern with them, and this is also something that I touched on in my prediction video that I made yesterday, has been their drafting. Their drafting has been pretty one-dimensional over time, and they've been able to get away with it because a lot of the teams in the upper division in the previous tour were not nearly as strong, not nearly as talented as Thunder Awaken. But my concern is that if they do make it to the major and they're forced to play up against the best teams from the other regions, that they might be able to exploit that a little bit, where we won't be having Thunder Awaken necessarily just clobbering these teams with drafts that don't exactly work all that well together, but they're just way higher skilled than them. So I'm hoping that they improve on that. I'm hoping that Pakaz maybe expands his hero pool a little bit. He played a lot of the same heroes in this tour. We'll see if he's able to get away with it or if they end up changing things up. Either way, I'm excited. And that leads me now to my number 3 team in this region, finishing with 223 or roughly 224 DPC points in total. Going through some deductions, we have Infamous, and Infamous has had such a pleasant surprise of a tour. I don't think anyone was expecting them to finish anywhere near the top, and then they ended up finishing second place in both the regional aspect and the regional finals. However, even with that, they did go through some roster changes, which was pretty unfortunate to see. But they brought in some pretty fantastic players to fill those slots, bringing in Slade into play position 4 and Oscar from Thunder Awaken, who I was just talking about had a fantastic first tour other than those finals. So we'll see if this ends up being enough to help Infamous get themselves into contention for a major. Again, I don't think they're necessarily on the same level yet as teams like Thunder Awaken and Beastcoast, but at the same time, I don't know if I would be overly surprised if they did make it to a major. They have been playing very, very well. And again, they did go through some pretty hefty point deductions with these roster changes, losing on roughly 86 points with these roster changes, which brings them down all the way to 223 right now. But 223 is still far enough ahead of a bunch of other teams in the DPC. And in fact, they are currently sitting in the top 12 in the entire DPC right now. Meaning that if TI started right now, there's a potential that 5 South American teams could get into TI, which is pretty insane. Of course, because now we have those 2 additional spots as wildcard spots for TI 11. But regardless, I think if they can manage to keep up with this consistency that they've been playing well and just continue to improve from here, I think that these guys can definitely get themselves to the same level as TSM is now in North America, where TSM was always kind of the little brother team of the 2 powerhouses of the region, EG and Quincy, never really quite able to beat them or overcome them, but now they are, and maybe Infamous can do the same thing. All right, now moving on to number 4, we have Apu King of Kings, the last team to have made it into those regional finals, and pretty solid tour all around for Apu King of Kings. I definitely wasn't expecting this roster to do nearly as well as they did, but to their credit, I thought they had pretty dynamic games, even in series that they did end up losing to some of these best teams, notably that one against Beastcoast, were very close series, and had they had maybe a little bit more composure or a little bit more practice with one another, I think they definitely could have pulled off those upsets. They did kind of fall short a little bit near the end of the tour, losing that tiebreaker match to Beastcoast and then flunking out of the regional finals quite early. But again, against teams like Infamous, Thunder Awaken, and Beastcoast, it's pretty understandable to be struggling a little bit. So for Apu King of Kings, who did go through some roster changes, I forgot to include how many points they lost there, which would be around 17 points that they lost because they had earned 60 DPC points and now they're sitting at about 43. They did bring in Dunha, who previously was in Black and Yellow in the previous tour, who I've already talked about was kind of a weird team, and I'm a little skeptical about this pickup, but I can't really judge a player just off of one tour's performance and one team's performance, so I'm hoping this ends up being enough for them, and who knows, maybe they can be in contention for a major spot as well. Now moving on to number 5, I have Lava finishing at 30 DPC points currently. They just barely missed out on those regional finals, finishing 5th place in the region. And with Lava, I have my concerns a little bit with them. I think with a roster like this, there was a little bit more expectation for them to do a little bit better in this first tour, and we really didn't feel that, even with there being a lot of teams that were pretty weak in the bottom half of South America's or upper division, I should say. Teams like No Ping, teams like SG Esports, hell, even Hikori, who ended up dodging relegation, I thought was a pretty weak team and definitely wasn't playing all that well. So we'll see if Lava's able to turn things around in this upcoming tour. Again, they really need to be able to consistently beat these weaker teams, or else I could very likely see them being one of the teams that gets knocked out in the following tour. So we'll see how it goes for them. Best of luck. And up to this point, I don't think there's a single team that's running a coach other than Infamous, who currently has Falco Style, who they actually just brought in 2 months ago, near the start of the new year. They've only been together for that short a period of time, but I think bringing in that coach has done pretty well for Infamous so far. Now moving on to Hikori, the final team in the upper division that was also there in the previous tour. And for Hikori, I have my concerns because it wasn't a very convincing first tour. They barely avoid relegation by beating No Ping in those tiebreaker matches. And they bring in a bunch of new players after losing quite a few, those being Analog and Theo the Core, players from that No Ping stack who struggled even more than Hikori did. And so I'm a little bit worried about Hikori here. Again, I think the upper division in every single region has gotten much stronger in this previous tour because we've had the shakeout of all those bottom teams. And I'm looking at Hikori's roster, and I don't necessarily know if I'm looking at one that is going to be staying in the upper division for much longer. I would love to see them stay here, but I have my concerns, and so I would love to hear you guys' thoughts about Hikori in specific. This is a team that I thought would do much better in the previous tour. If you check my Tour 1 prediction video, I think I had them finishing like 4th or 5th place, and they ended up finishing 6th place, almost 7th place. So we'll see how this tour goes for them. Either way, they're currently sitting with 0 DPC points, so they're going to need to get some DPC points quick if they want to have any sort of opportunity to make it into the top 12, although with the fact that only 2 teams from South America make it to a major, that's where you earn a lot of points, feels kind of unlikely. And finally, taking a look at now our two teams coming in from the lower division. We first up have Infinity. Infinity is a stack that I was super hyped for when they were joining the upper division. Sure, their hard carry player was a bit of a one-trick pony in a TA patch, but I mean, what do you know it? Even after the patch, we're still kind of in a TA meta right now where it feels still very viable to be running TA as a mid laner or a hard carry with a draft that can utilize her strengths. But unfortunately, they're not able to hold on to Parker. He ends up joining SG Esports, which I thought was a little bit of a strange move. But regardless, they bring in Rises, who was previously on Black and Yellow as well, who, again, I won't touch on all that much, but we'll see how this goes. They also bring in Michael to play position 4, so we'll see how this tour goes for them. I think that the roster still looks pretty good, and there still has a lot of the pieces from the previous tour that did so well in the lower division. And I think it's pretty likely that they do actually end up being able to beat teams like Hikori and Lava, who have been struggling. And who knows, maybe they get themselves on pace with a team like King of Kings, who have cemented themselves as one of the better teams in the division that isn't quite a major team quite yet. I'm excited to see how they do, but for now, of course, still 0 DPC points for them since this is their first tour in the upper division. And next up, we have Balrogs, the second team making it in through the lower division, one that I'm also very excited for, but also a little worried about as well. They've got a fantastic roster, specifically Burna. The amount of series that I watched where Burna was just absolutely carrying was fantastic, and I'm hoping to see some more of that in this upper division. I think that he is definitely the player that this team should be playing around the most right now. He's very talented. We've got RoboZ playing mid. We've got King Tekka, who's coming in to play offlane for this upcoming tour, and thankfully, because they have 0 DPC points, much like Infinity and Hikori, they don't have to worry about those point deductions, which is a pretty nice thing about having 0 DPC points. They then have ZXCA and Sexy Yogi, hopefully I pronounced that right, to play position 4 and 5. They do also have a coach, Zendelers, or however you pronounce that, and we'll see how this upcoming tour goes for them. I'm very excited to see if they are going to be able to maybe keep up with other teams like Infinity, who should be able to beat these weaker teams in this division. But anyways, I would love to hear your guys' opinion. Who do you guys think wins this division? Who do you guys think gets relegated? I think that's going to be probably the more difficult question to answer, as our top 2 very likely will be Beastcoast and Thunder Awakened. Maybe Infamous gets in there, but out of these bottom 5 teams, I have no idea who's going to get relegated. So I would love to hear you guys' thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. And again, if you haven't seen my prediction video that I posted yesterday, feel free to check that out, link in the description, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow with another video. Power rankings on Friday too. Bye.